So welcome everybody, and welcome to this alumni event discussing the topic of ocean plastics. And we're joined by alumni from all 4 faculties at the college, but also, as you can see from the sharing in the button, the chat button, from really around the world. Registered for the event, we had 35 countries, and I think that's a really inspiring way that we can reach alumni globally with this very important issue. So ocean plastics, ocean pollution by plastics really is a global issue. And for the next hour, experts from our Imperial community will be discussing the possible solution and solutions and innovations from around the world. And each of them will bring a unique perspective to this conversation. Now, I have to say, I am really pleased that we have Dr. Arturo Castillo Castillo joining us today and sharing this panel session. He is really our Imperial expert on the subject and leads the Ocean Plastics Network at the college. So thank you, Arturo, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today to help facilitate the discussion with our amazing panelists to talk about ocean plastic. As you may know, the drivers for plastic pollution continue to grow, while progress in solving parts of the problem has been slow and fragmented. Plastic pollution is very visual. It is immediate and is very difficult to deny. It requires strong and urgent action around the world, not just in low-income countries, as is something I suggested or argued. Today, we have a very packed agenda. And to start off, I would like to tell you a little bit about the context within which this event is happening. Within the last 6 months, the college has launched 3 major initiatives related to pollution reduction, sustainability, and entrepreneurship. They are examples of the level of commitment and leadership of the college in these areas. The first one is the Transition to Zero Pollution Initiative. It was launched in September last year, and its objective is to foster systems thinking, discovery science, and cross-disciplinary research to tackle all types of pollution. It will create partnerships between science, industry, and government. And it will build on previous work on environmental toxicity and climate change to create a zero pollution future. The second initiative is the college's sustainability strategy 2021 to 2026. It was launched last month and is highly ambitious in 3 themes. The first one is resources, then academic excellence, and then engagement. It has created a structure to oversee sustainability activities across all campuses. It will expand college participation in the laboratory efficiency assessment framework, and it will also create a network of staff and student sustainability champions. Finally, the third initiative is the Center for Climate Change Innovation. It was launched less than a week ago, last Thursday, by Imperial and the Royal Institution. It will advance London's leadership in innovation and climate change, supporting businesses, policymakers, and investors. The aim is to create spaces for collaboration to close to the city's investments district, to invent and develop the changes needed to deliver a climate resilient future. The vision is to strengthen the UK's ability to translate research into cutting-edge technologies and clean tech startups. So now, I would like to move to the part of the event that is to do with the panel itself. And what I will be doing is to introduce the panelists one by one, and I will ask them an introductory question that will be the same for everybody. But also, since I am an alumnus of the college as well, I was asked to say a couple of words about how I came to work in plastic pollution. And for me, it links back directly to my MSc and my PhD thesis, because at the time I was working on how to obtain and how to recover energy and materials from waste. But then over time, I realized that if we're going to reduce raw material extraction and overall waste, a lot more work was needed in the upstream. So over the years, I started working in industrial symbiosis and what is now called the circular economy. And then when I heard about the Ocean Plastic Solutions Network, I really wanted to volunteer to lead and to get the network officially registered, because I saw that there was a lot of emphasis, both in the media and academia, about the impact of plastic once it's already waste and once it's already in the environment. And I personally am convinced that we need to tackle pollution on land if we're going to make a dent on this problem. So first and foremost, that's what we need to focus on. So I also have just one sentence on the Ocean Plastic Solutions Network. And the Ocean Plastic Solutions Network is one of the multi-faculty networks of excellence at college. And we have 4 different working groups that go from ocean modeling through to chemistry, product design, and societal change. And we aim to create collaborations across all faculties in college. There will also be some more details at the end, but please feel free to get in touch as well if you like more information. Now, for the real substance of the day, I would like to introduce our first panelist, who is Zhixuan Wang. She is a PhD in chemical engineering. She will be an alumnus very soon. And she is co-founder and director of Algreen and winner of the We Innovate program for female entrepreneurs. Zhixuan leads on R&D and manages the testing and validation of Algreen plant-based products. Her multiple research interests include algae, microbiology, aerogels, solvents, and process analysis. Zhixuan has previously presented at the conference of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers in the European Horizon project. So in terms of the introductory question, this is about the very complex challenge of plastic pollution, which I see more as a group of problems rather than a single problem. So Zhixuan, I was wondering whether you can tell us about, from the perspective of Algreen, how do you think your activities contribute to solve one or more parts of the problem?
Hi, I'm Zhixuan from Algreen. So in Algreen, we develop sustainable solutions to deal with the plastic pollution, and our materials, they coming from the sustainable algae. So we extract the sustainable material from algae, and we make alternative solutions to the microplastics. And our green bees project is the kind of bees we make micro bees to replace the microplastics added in that, like the shampoo, the shower, those kind of things. Because usually before, for the shower or shampoo, people add a lot of microplastics, and after you showering, those kind of microplastics, they will go through our sink and into the ocean. So in Algreen, our first product is to make biodegradable micro beads to replace those kind of microplastics and to relieve those kind of microplastic pollutions into the ocean.
Thank you very much, Zhixuan.
Thank you.
So now I would like to introduce our second panelist, is Pauline Vaskou. She is a graduate of the BSc in Biology in 2014 and from the MSc in Environmental Technology in 2015. She is Ocean Partnerships Manager at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Pauline is a member of the Environment Program at Bloomberg Philanthropies, where she oversees partnerships for the Vibrant Ocean Initiative. She identifies and manages partnerships across more than 10 countries to protect coral reefs, rebuild fisheries, and promote ocean transparency with a particular focus on strategic government engagement. Before joining Bloomberg, Pauline was leading Tesco's responsible sourcing work on commodities with high social and environmental risks, where she developed corporate commitments working with leading NGOs and industry bodies. So, Pauline, can you tell us from the perspective of Bloomberg Philanthropies, how your activities contribute to solving one or more parts of the problem?
Of course, thank you, Arturo, and hello, everyone. I'm joining from London today. So I work for Bloomberg Philanthropies. Bloomberg Philanthropies is a foundation which encompasses all of Mike Bloomberg's giving, and the foundation is funded through the vast majority of the profits from Bloomberg LP, the financial data and news company. So the Vibrant Oceans Initiative, which is our ocean grant-making program, really started in 2012. And at that time, it was very clear to us that the ocean issues were underfunded, especially compared to other environmental issues. So we know that about 2% of all the environmental philanthropic funding goes to the ocean. So that's tiny, and plastics would be the smallest a small part of that. So there was an attention issue, especially back then when plastics were not really in the news. So we work with governments, with NGOs to prevent and reduce plastics before they reach the ocean, specifically focusing on policies at a national and local level, and also supporting local communities who are worst affected by pollution, and also on the front line of climate change near the coast.
Thank you very much, Pauline. That is amazing. That means that at the same time, you've been one of the pioneers and also one of the few organizations that spot all of the places where most of the work is needed. So that's really amazing. Thank you very much. Then for our third panelist, we have Alexis Grosskopf. He is a graduate from the MSc in Civil and Environmental Engineering from 2010, and he's co-founder and CEO of startup accelerator OceanHub Africa. OceanHub Africa specializes in technologies with positive impact on the ocean. Alexis is also the co-founder of Ocean Innovation Africa, which is a physical and digital platform which aims to inspire entrepreneurs, attract private capital, and accelerate the development of sustainable ocean solutions. Now, for the introductory question, from the perspective of someone who helps other people develop solutions, I would like to call you like the meta solver, as it were. Can you let us know a little bit more about your activities and how you contribute to solving various parts of the problem?
Thanks, Arturo. Thanks for having me today. Meta solver is, and we're just a facilitator, right? We're trying to inspire more entrepreneurs, entice more private capital, and catalyze more partnerships to develop the solutions, right? Ultimately, what Ocean Innovation Africa and OceanHub Africa are doing is just helping the development and the adoption of new sustainable ocean solutions. We provide business and product development services to startups like any accelerator would do. We only focus on African-based ocean impact startups. We don't have a clear focus on specifically plastics. We help to tackle all the challenges that oceans are facing today, the main ones at least. Pollution is one of them, and plastic is a vertical within pollution, but also overexploitation and the effects of global warming on the ocean. So the Ocean Innovation Africa, the events and convening platform, helps to educate to some extent and inspire upstream, and then downstream we help startups that are collecting waste plastic before they get into the streams and into the oceans to make bricks, eco bricks. Energy from waste is also an option. And we also help a startup like called Captain Fun Plastic that works in e-learning, for example, providing materials and lessons for the younger generation to adopt the 5 R's. Sorry, recycle, reuse, repurpose, reduce. Yeah. And when you help me, but yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent. So really you have a broad portfolio, and then just pollution and plastic are important elements in that. And you actually work across different parts of the value chain within that, I presume. So from creating, helping the idea all the way through actually helping people develop their start, their initiatives. Excellent. So that was a very interesting round of introductory contributions. And the one thing that strikes me always when you're in an event like this or in a meeting and you see a group of people all doing such interesting work is that the one question that comes to mind immediately is, how do you get to do what you do? I'm sure that many people in the audience are also wondering. Now, I have that question for the three of you, but also I'm wondering, how do you get to do what you do, and what was the main challenge that you overcame on the way to getting there? Should we start with you, Pauline, because I think particularly your work involves working across so many different sectors and with so many different stakeholder groups that I'd be particularly interested in how you got there and what was the main challenge.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a fantastic question, and I love sharing a little bit about my career path and hearing about others. So as a little anecdote to get us started, I think my first job after Imperial, I partially got because I did a dissertation on sustainable insect food, which was really interesting and just got people talking about it when I had interviews. So I would say, like, pick topics that you truly find like cutting edge, interesting, that cut across different topics. And that helped me. But then from that point onwards, I think if you're in a big organization, networking and looking at different opportunities within that organization is always a tip and something to do. And think internally about your next opportunities, and also go to events, speak to people, try and understand what is the latest in the field that you want to get into. And finally, I would say take some risks. If you don't take risks, you're not going to get to where you want to go. I have applied to jobs without having all the skill sets, and that's fine because it's very rare that you would tick all the boxes. And before my current job, where I spend the vast majority of my time working on ocean issues, I really was working on land issues, commodities, as you said, when I was at Tesco, the UK supermarket. So I would say that my employer had to take a bit of a punt with me, and the fact that I would be able to upskill and just learn from all the people in the fields and do that relatively quickly. So I think remembering that you're selling the skills that you have and not always knowledge, because knowledge keeps improving. So you need to work on your knowledge all the time. But your biggest asset are your skills, your relationship skills, your attitude, and how you're going to go about learning that new knowledge that you need.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And actually, one of the lessons probably is that you need to keep a focus on the future and the potential rather than just what's historically.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the clues. Yes.
Looking ahead.
Yes, interesting. Very, very good. Thank you. Now, if I could go to Zhixuan. Zhixuan, also, the same question, how did you get to do what you're doing, and what was the main challenge along the way? We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Yeah, I think the major challenge for us is still the R&D, because Algreen is still very young and we have the product lab scale. So right now is the major challenge is we need to transfer our lab invention out of lab into the industry scale. So we need to achieve the kind of industry integration, because the situation right now is I can make perfect products in my lab, but if we have any pilot contract coming in, it is impossible for me to make individual bees by myself. So like a kind of seamless industry integration will be very helpful, like to bring our products out of lab into the industry. And also there is another thing, because for me, it's like we want to develop a kind of sustainable business. So sustainable, it means not only means the product is sustainable, we want to make sure the whole supply chain is sustainable. It's like we have a sustainable product, and then we have a overall sustainable process. So we need to make sure the whole industry integration, after the industry integration, the process is sustainable enough. And we also have a co-founder in my team, and he is an expert in process simulation. So like he can help the company to deliver a kind of sustainable industrial integration process. So I think right now the major challenge for us is like scale up. Yeah, and we're working on it gradually. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, something very interesting in your case is that you're a student entrepreneur. So I was going to ask you as a follow-on question from this is what do you think is one of the lessons that would be of most value to all the students that might be thinking about being students and entrepreneurs at the same time?
Because for me is I feel like I started the entrepreneurship after I finished my thesis, and also I have some working experience before my PhD. So I think like for being a student, the first task is still study, like to have enough knowledge and strong background in your field. And then with the knowledge you have, you can develop some deep thinking on the industry you involved in. And then you can develop some industry connections and with the people and learn people from near you and talk to other people if you have any idea. But I think the first thing, I mean, yeah, the first thing is still like focus on your study is the most
Of course.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, the first step is the first step, first things first. Very, very good. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to Alexis. Now, from the perspective of someone who creates sustainable prosperity, what would be, that pathway, and what were the challenges along the way?
Thanks for asking, Arturo. The challenges along the way. Okay, the first one was obviously you're in a lot of parts of the world, but in particular in Africa, your network is your net worth, big time. So it was to bring people together because we were to attract entrepreneurs and deliver nice value to their product development, business development. So we needed people and expertise. And so the first challenge was to, I believe the ocean has been very seldom marketed as such. Perhaps, Pauline, that's one of the reasons why so little money goes to ocean philanthropy. So we had to put out the narrative of there is such thing as an ocean industry here in Africa. I mean, it's a concept that has evolved in the global north, but in the global south, it's taking its time, was slightly lagging behind. And it's now up to speed, I suppose. We had to do this thing of bringing people together and narrating and putting out the narrative of this ocean impact and ocean economy and industry where we all those industries depend on one particular asset, one given asset, common one to all of them. And should one undermine this asset, they will undermine the business and that of others. So that was the first challenge. And now once we had people together, it was very challenging to stop pleasing. Everybody was trying, as we say in French, to try and pull the duvet on their side of the bed. I don't know if there's a similar expression in English, but I'm sure everybody will understand. And we had to deal with people that want fish first and people that wanted fish plus livelihoods of coastal community. We wanted to deal with people that say, all right, any industry, but no oil and gas, no seabed mining, which again comes with its pros and cons. I tend to believe that it's easier to shift things from within rather than fight from outside. So rather have everyone around the table. But yeah, so it's concealing everyone's perspectives and likings to ultimately come all of us and all the different stakeholders around the table, because ocean ultimately is a common good. So we need everyone to agree. See, if 90% of the people do their utmost effort, but then 10% can put the whole efforts of the first 90% in complete jeopardy. So we need everyone around the table, and that's been the most challenging aspect of what we're doing today.
And that's very interesting. And that's also what we see from the research side of things, because a lot of the solutions and actually the questions about the solutions sometimes fail to recognize that different stakeholders are under different pressures. And of course, that will lead to what you were saying about, people have different priorities. And it's not just because they would have like a whimsical idea about a preference. It's really a very pressing need in a lot of those cases. So I can imagine that is a very tough challenge, but it seems like you're doing quite well. So right. So now what I like to do next is there is one topic that if we didn't touch on it today, that would be like the elephant in the room, and that's discarded fishing gear in the ocean. So I don't know whether I can start with you, Pauline. From the perspective of someone who develops projects and helps support different kinds of projects across sectors and so on. Do you have any views on, when sometimes people talk about improving monitoring or improving collection or any other initiatives? Do you have any preferences or any dislikes about any of those? And would you like to see your organization do more on any of those?
Yeah. So I think monitoring is always extremely valuable and necessary, but the problem we have with plastics is to stop the production and the pollution arriving in the ocean. So I'm taking the same approach for fishing gear, and what we're doing is working with partners, NGO partners. One of our key partners is called OceanHub, and working with communities who are using, for example, nets that have a lot of adverse effects regardless of the plastic. So for example, bycatch, if the size of the net is not right, and looking at the picture holistically and then saying, okay, how do we transition those people to a different type of fishing gear that is more respectful of the environment and more sustainable in the long term, or how do we transition them to a different kind of job? And in the process, you collect the fishing gear and the nets, so it doesn't even arrive in the ocean. I think there's a suite of projects that are very cool about collecting the fishing gear and making different products, but those tend to not be fully scalable. So our approach is to work upstream and prevent the fishing gear in ending up in the ocean.
That's very interesting. I think having a holistic approach about asking at least twice why was the problem there, why and why, then that really gets you closer to what is needed. So that's very interesting. Alexis, would you like to come in on this? Do you have a view on things to do on this?
Sure, thanks. Clearly, I would agree with you, Pauline. One of the major issue there is the technology, the tools that are being used beyond the harmful potential of plastics when discarded in the ocean. There's also a potential look at this with respect to accountability. There's no traceability if someone discards their nets or whatever fishing gear into the ocean, so we can't chase them back. So looking at improving the gear is one thing, and perhaps finding ways to implement traceability sounds very difficult when we think of small-scale fishermen in the global south, but we know that the vast majority of fishing today is done by industrial fishing, even though hopefully this will change with the head of the World Trade Organization and fish subsidies. But I think accountability would be something interesting to look at, and helping improve livelihoods using other means than just fishing, as Pauline was saying, is definitely something to look to when we talk about the small-scale fisheries.
Yes, and it also seems that we should use better some of the mechanisms that are already there. Like there are some regulations and some monitoring schemes, but it's just that they need to be used better. So it's probably a matter of the community actually making progress together. But very interesting. Thank you very much, Alexis, for the insight there. And then I would like to ask next, Pauline, we talked about challenges a minute ago, but I think it would be very interesting to see as well from the positive side, what are all the opportunities and unexpected synergies that arise when you're working across so many different stakeholder groups and sectors? Do you have some comments on that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think especially through 2020, what the pandemic has taught us is that we need to be very flexible in our approach, and I think that is a great learning to take forward, because we typically plan 3 to 4 year grants, let's say, to really build relationships with partners and give that consistent support. But within that amount of time, you still need to change your approach because things change. 2020 was a great example of that, but even without, you have changes. So I think I see my organization as needing to be a little bit more flexible going forward. This is something we have done, but I think this year has shown us we need to do more of that to support the organizations we work with and give them the flexibility, as they know the communities they work with, they know the political context of the country they're in, let's say. But more generally, Bloomberg Philanthropies is really guided by the data. You would be surprised in the ocean space how many decisions are made without actually taking a hard look at the data, like where's the plastics coming from? And we're now really starting to have a good picture from the science. So the argument that that the science is not good enough to make a decision, I'm not buying that anymore. I don't think that is the case. We have a picture of global flows of plastics. What are the types of products? What is the infrastructure needed to collect those products? Are there actually recyclables? All of this, I think we need to take a hard look and be guided by data in our decision making. And that's what we try to do as a foundation as well.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. And again, I think one of the lessons I'm taking is that one of the things you're bringing to your organization is, always take the holistic view and always take the full value chain and always take what are the different constraints. That's very interesting. And
I think in a way, when you're one step removed, you also have that slightly more objective view at time, which can be a problem, but also there's benefits to that. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you very much.
Now, if I can ask you, Alexis, so you are someone who works in generating and supporting partnerships. But now I wonder, and I know that other people wonder, whether that is something that can be engineered, putting partnerships together, like bubble them up together, and whether there is really a substitute for the time needed to actually build trust, because trust is essential in this, and also the knowledge that you need to actually build something from the ground up. So how do you reconcile those two things? So on the one hand, you have the need for trust and deep knowledge, and on the other hand, you might have lots of time pressures. So how do you deal with that?
Thanks for the question. I just want to bounce off what Pauline just said. There's, as most of the audience probably knows now, the decade that we're entering now in 2021 and about in 2030 is the decade of the ocean, according to the United Nations. And one of the key mission of this ocean decade is to place science-based decision-making at the core of everything that is being done on a political agenda and on a business agenda. So very much tying into what Pauline just said. So I think obviously it's brilliant what you guys are doing. Now to go back to your question, Arturo, thanks. How do we engineer trust? Okay, we don't. Short answer. No. Sorry about that. But no. There is something to this. We're such a tiny ecosystem. I think, again, Pauline mentioned there's only 2% of philanthropic money that goes into the ocean, and there's probably less than 2% of all organizations in the world that look at ocean altogether. So we are a tiny yet emerging and growing ecosystem. And that in itself is a means of building the trust. And on top of this, I think most of the approach that we've had with our different partners, and we do have partners across the globe, we co-led the creation of something called 1,000 Ocean Startups, which is a coalition of all the ESOs, entrepreneurial support organizations, incubators and accelerators, and the VCs, early stage investors that have for mandate the Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water, together under this one banner of the 1,000 Ocean Startups, which is a target, a pledge that we're trying to get to during this ocean decade. So we have a bunch of different partners across the globe in this emerging ecosystem, and we've, with all of them, taken baby steps. So we have this very lean approach of saying, okay, we're not enough to meet the challenges. We don't have enough time to meet the challenges and have those discussions around the issues of trust and your KYC, your customer or whatever, your partner, KYP perhaps. So let's do it by the practice of activities and collaborations. So with pretty much all of them, we've taken very small steps, but we've trusted each other from the outset, and we grow from there. So we may do with the lack of trust by taking small steps and moving together, and then the steps that we take together as we grow are bigger and bigger exponentially, and eventually, hopefully, matching the scale and the pace of the ocean challenges that plastic, for example, could represent. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. And it also just clarified the picture for me that when you have a small community, sometimes you just realize that you need to move forward, and you look around and say, well, there's not many of us. We might as well hold each other hand in hand and go for it, because otherwise then nothing would happen. So that sounds like a very interesting story. So thank you very much for that. Now I have another question for Zhixuan. I know that many people in the audience must be wondering, what is it like to be a student founder? So I was wondering whether you can share with us a little bit about the chronological experience of how was your journey from the first coffee with your co-founders or your collaborators, all the way through to the day when you had your startup up and running with your first project online.
I think I have research interest in the polysaccharide material, start from my master's degree. And then I continue my research on algae. So it's like the same polysaccharide material. And after that, I think we found a chance is about the We Innovate competition. And we have some small achievement in my lab. And then I think maybe we can take out our lab achievement into this competition. And during that time, me and my co-founder, we are the PhD colleague. and we work together like already for 3 or 4 years. So it's like we know each other for a long time. And in the way Innovate, there is a program called Imperial, MBA Connect, but they called Imperial Launch right now. So they're helping the team like us. We only have the technology people, but we do not have any business background. So it's like they are building kind of bridge to introduce some people with business background to our team. And because of this program, we meet Marta, and she is a EMBA student studying at the business school. So, and we have a conversation with her and in the We Innovate competition. And after that is, at the beginning, we only have the technology people in our team, but after We Innovate, we have the business people in our team. And we worked together for 1 year and quite happy. So after the We Innovate, we still keep this kind of collaboration. And I do think the Imperial Launch is a very good opportunities for us, because usually like PhD students, we usually put like 24 hours of our life in the lab. So we do not have too much like social or networking opportunities to meet people from working in the business industries, especially the experienced people who can really bring some value into our business. And because of the program, We Innovate and the Imperial Launch, we meet people, our business partner. So yeah, the journey is quite interesting, and it's quite interesting actually. And I think Imperial has a lot of activities to support the entrepreneurship. If you want to develop some kind of entrepreneurship experience, like there's a lot of activities in the entrepreneur lab, and you can choose to join. Yeah, and I think all of them are very helpful.
So the moral of the story is, try to, if you have an idea, try to look for all the help that you can get, and also try to make the best out of the options that you have already in college, and just keep going. And but again, we're still in the topic of trust. I think it was interesting that you had your colleagues that you knew from some time back. That is really interesting. So if I could come back quickly to Pauline, I wonder whether you have a comment on what I was talking to Alexis about, which is this how to reconcile the need to build trust and deep knowledge with the other need of meeting time demands, and how does that is reconciled from your perspective?
Yes. So we work in 10 priority countries around the world at Bloomberg Philanthropies under this banner of the Vibrant Oceans Initiative. And you can imagine that if I go to an island in Indonesia, I'm not going to be trusted. I'm just not from the community. I don't really have a fishing background. I don't understand their issues, day-to-day issues, and I don't have the context on how the community has changed over the past 15 years and how tourism, let's say, may have brought more plastics, and the development of the hotels may have polluted their local waters. So what we try and do is work with a mixture of international organizations as well as local, who can bridge that gap for us. And we are a lean team who really rely on ears on the ground. And I think that technique has been particularly successful during the pandemic, when travel is not an option. You need people who are there and also who have community champions. So the way they work is they find people in the community who are particularly passionate and can be an entry point, as well as community leaders. And that is how you kind of can slowly fast track trust, because the trust is actually already there. So you just try and go where the trust is. And that trust has been built already in the community. So it's not a new thing.
Yes, so probably you show that you had a genuine interest to help, and then you find a bridge, and then you get to the right people in the right place, and actually manage to have a project based on trust, even if it involves more stakeholders.
Yes, and I think we should also, I should be transparent and say that there's time at the beginning in the planning phase that you can't really avoid, because you may have an idea of what you think the problems are around pollution and plastics pollution in the community, but actually if you speak to people there, they may give you a different picture. So we try to not be driven by what we think is the problem and the solution, but really hear it from people who are experiencing it, to create a more successful project.
Indeed, indeed. Otherwise, you're just imposing a solution with not knowing what the real problem is.
That's right.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. So, Alexis, I have one more point for you. So, if there is a topic that is now very increasingly studied in academia, and also I think in entrepreneurship, which is how to deal with the unintended consequences, which of innovations and new business ventures and everything, because by definition they are unknown. So from your perspective, so do you build any checks and balances from the outset when you start supporting a project, or do you have a plan to have some stage gates or something? How do you go about that?
We use nukes. No. Thanks for the question. We have a few checks and balances, as you said. The startups that we take on first and foremost are not selected just by the board of directors of OceanHub Africa, but by a selection committee. The executive directors of OceanHub Africa will shortlist from. We put out a call for applications. At Vaskou, we had over 130 applications from African ocean-based, ocean-minded startups. We honed in on to 25 and then to 12. And then these pitch before a selection committee made of experts, entrepreneurs, impact investors, and scientific experts. We have a wealth of different partnerships, and we're very lucky with WWF, Mission Blue, universities here in South Africa and in the Netherlands and in France, with scientists that are helping us to assess on a high level whether this possible candidate would have a potentially positive impact. It is impossible to, it's like a life cycle analysis. It's impossible to know from the onset whether it will have a positive impact throughout the whole value chain and throughout the whole ecosystem that the oceans represent. Saving the abalones in South Africa might kill the whales in Cape Cod, America. I don't know, but we need to draw down a perimeter, a line, and explore this, and then from there grow out. So what we do, we have the selection committee that helps us. We have regular reviews of the progress that the product and the business are having with these external experts. And in particular, after the first 3 months of acceleration, we have a kind of a mid-sessional exam, and everything's reviewed, and trajectory can be corrected then, or whole businesses can be dismissed from the program if there is too strong of a doubt. Then there's the graduation also that is vetted by external parties, yet another group of people, not the same as the selection committee. And then we ask all of the entrepreneurs that we support and that graduate and enter our alumni program to do some reporting annually to make sure that they have the right impact. They still have embedded into their DNA, this cultural DNA of an enterprise, the impact that they had when we accelerated them. And if they need any help in that regard, we still there after the graduation, after 6 months of acceleration, to help them gear their business towards the positive impact. So we do have a set of checks and balances that are required, but we do take a risk when we select the candidate at first, and there's no other way to go about it. We need to get moving now.
Excellent. No, that sounds really comprehensive and very circumspect, and at the same time proactive. So it sounds very interesting. Thank you very much. Now, I'm very conscious of the time because we also need to allow for some questions from the audience. But I just have one last point, and it's a little bit of a challenge for the three of you. So it's if you had the opportunity to have a one maximum 2-sentence message for any policymaker of your choice, whether it is national, international, of any ministry whatsoever, what would that message be? So if I could start with you, Pauline.
This is a great question, especially with the G7 in the UK and the COP later this year. Messages for policymakers. So I have a lot, but I'll make it concise. I think what I'd like to see more of is national science-based policies.
Okay, very good. And how about you, Zhixuan?
I think it'd be better like we have more policies on the use of microplastics, because right now the bans, there are international bans on the microplastics added into the shampoo or shower, but actually there is only limited of the cosmetic products, and the other cosmetic products like lipstick is still allowed to add microplastic in. So like in the future, maybe we can have more bans on those kind of cosmetic products.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Alexis.
Thanks. The two main drivers for change, I'll try to keep it short, are people, if you and I decide to stop single-use plastics, and regulators, governments, if governments ban single-use plastics. So more in education and more regulations, but yet also the final one, because if governments stop single-use plastics and we decide not to buy anything, we need to provide your Tesco's, for example, Pauline, or your M&S or whatever, Sainsbury's in the UK, with the right solution. So there needs to be also more resources allocated to finding and spreading those solutions that have been shortlisted as, the ones that have the positive effect, to help scale them. We're running out of time, really. It's the third time I'm saying this, but I do believe we're running out of time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we are at that point in the event where I'd like to say a couple of words about how happy I was that we had the discussion and that we gained some wonderful insights into the careers, the perspectives, the interests of our panelists, but also now we realize how much hard work we all need to continue doing, because this is a huge problem. We saw that there is very little investment. The community is still very small, and the problem is huge. So now the only thing that remains for me is to try to say to Nicola, if we could have the question and answer session coming up.
Thanks, Arturo.
Thank you for joining us back, Nicola.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to try and field you, put your way some questions that are coming through. Just remind everybody that put their questions in the chat to put them on the Q&A. We've got quite a lot of questions. So just been upvoted above another question was actually, and there are a couple of questions around this, any tips or advice for STEM teachers in high schools? How can we engage, inspire, encourage young people to be innovators in this area for the future? And there was another one from a mom I saw that said, I'm looking for mentors for my 16-year-old son. So what resources can people turn to, and any tips and advice?
In terms of STEM education, Alexis, do you have a view on this?
I know we have as I mentioned earlier, we have a startup that has, and I'm not trying to promote this particular startup, but they have this program, they've put together this program, an amazing program that helps. It's either for homeschooling or for teachers in the school, in the classroom, to help entice a new mindset where plastic is not trash but treasure, and trying to shift the perception from a very young age of what could be done, what should be done, without looking necessarily at the bad consequences of littering, which are obvious, but we don't necessarily want to shock the younger ones, and looking at how impactful it could be and how playful it is to actually treasure and not consider this as trash for the plastic that we've used, and then obviously trying to convince them and put a mindset of reducing from the source more than anything else. I think and I'll just conclude that I think I'm a late millennial. I'm just right after the millennial, but I still like to consider myself as such. But after there was the Z generation, and then I think there's what's called the sustainable natives. So a lot of the new generations, they have this embedded into their DNA, so to speak. It is important that it is echoed and resonates with the the educational programs, but the will should already be there and implemented into the younger ones, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Pauline, you were nodding. Do you have some comments on this?
Yes, definitely. It's such a great question. I agree. I think we need more awareness, and the younger generation is already aware, already interested. So we also need good content. So we have a couple of partners who work in this field. The first one is called OceanX, and they have a boat and really explore areas of the ocean that haven't been explored before, which is the majority of the ocean, to be perfectly honest, and see if there's plastics there, for example. And I think we've seen a lot of behavior change from just sharing the wonders of nature and the creatures from the deep. So they're making a lot of videos which can be found online, and also currently are doing an expedition and are doing live classrooms experiments, which I think is a great way to engage between scientists on board of the ship and then young people. So it's called OceanX. And then there's also another platform which we use even with our employees around the world, so it can be appropriate for slightly older children, which is called Zooniverse. And it's a platform for citizen science. So you can log on and help with different research projects, some of them marine related, and it's a great entry point to talk about wider issues and also feel like you're doing something to help with the problems. So it's called Zooniverse.
Very good, and very interesting. All of those options, and it's true that both what Alexis was saying, that the initial desire needs to be there, but also, as Pauline was saying, let's use all the resources and let's try to build new initiatives that help provide more information. I would just also add that we need to move also as well from awareness raising to full engagement, because information can stick or maybe not, but once you start actually take an expedition or whatever it is you're organizing, then there is a better chance of actually changing some behavior and changing attitude. Going back to that question on mentoring, I wonder whether, Zhixuan, do you have any insight on how do young people get some mentoring to improve their knowledge on this?
I think because my mainly mentoring experience is like to lead the undergraduate project. So I think for young people, maybe before they enter the college, I think we have a kind of colleague. We are in the same concord of Greenhouse Accelerator, and their program is called HOPE. They are working on to deliver the educational support to the young people. I think it's mainly teenage people like study at primary school or secondary school, and they will do a kind of educational program and working on to educate the public, like what kind of behavior may lead to the plastic pollutions, and like how much greenhouse gas emission will be generated by those kind of plastic pollutions. So I think HOPE is a kind of good program, and they are also involved in the Greenhouse Accelerator, and we are in the same concord. And I think I can leave their information later after the program, yeah, so everyone can reach them.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's just important to say that within Imperial, there are many activities for engagement and for outreach to schools. There is, I think, also a problem that is specifically dedicated to outreach to schools. And also within the Ocean Plastic Solutions Network, we have a colleague, Charles Romain. He actually is very active. He's gone to a couple of schools to speak about ocean plastic to pupils. So we hope to do a lot more on that. So yeah, those are the answers of that question. So we'll go back to Nicola.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ashley, for that question. And we'll try and pull them together, I think, in the email that we send out afterwards. So there are two questions that are jumping around as top questions. And one is ocean plastic a truly international pollutant? because the efficient global transport and mixing of the oceans, like for greenhouse gases, can we say that the release of plastic is equally damaging, independent of location?
Alexis, would you like to go first?
Yes, thanks. Short answer is yes. I mean, my views. Unfortunately, yeah, it's just terrible how, you know, there's those 7 gyres, huge. One of them actually as large as a continent. They call it the 7th continent in the Pacific Ocean, South Pacific Ocean. So they do travel a lot. They do end up in common places on the surface of the ocean. And we know that now, thanks to science and a bit of research and data, that 10% of this plastic unfortunately comes from Southeast Asia and a bit of Africa in the you know, in Nigeria and the Gulf of Guinea, that side, Western Africa. So there are bigger sources in some places, and most of the plastic do gather in known places today, but only recently, you know, did we know about them. But in the process, they do travel a lot. Now, that's for the bulk of the plastic, the plastic that floats at the surface in the first, you know, couple of centimeters to a meter. We are slowly realizing and discovering that there's more and more microplastic that sinks a little bit. And there's plastic that's being swallowed by marine animals and you know, defecated from other places. So it's taken, it's not really digested by those animals, but they do travel with them in their guts and you know, before they're expelled. So it is truly a global pollution, irrespectively of where, you know, where does the source come from. And it gets a lot worse, not only because it's harder to treat, but because it travels faster and deeper when it becomes tiny, minute plastics. So a short answer was yes.
Pauline, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'd like to add to that. I think the short answer is yes, for all the reasons that have been mentioned, but also because plastics is a huge source of greenhouse gases. So I think if you think about it from an air pollution perspective, the petrochemical industry, there's also that impact, which is very, which is global because it's air, but also really affects the communities near those petrochemical plants. So that is an issue that more people are starting to look at, the intersection between climate and plastics. And then secondly, in the process of production, there's a lot of chemicals that can be added and are toxic and break down when the plastic becomes microplastics and then end up everywhere. So that is a huge concern. And I think all those things combined make me feel that, yes, this is a global source of pollution, very much so.
I think I will just add to that question. There was an element about damage. So, of course, yes, it is a global problem. And although there are main currents and main patterns, it's been demonstrated that plastic can go even outside of the patterns in many parts of the world. And also there are 2 different kinds of damage, which is not always recognized. One is the physical damage, which is what we see a lot in the media when birds stop being able to digest their food, or whether, you know, other marine animals get entangled. But there's also chemical damage, which is, as Pauline was alluding to, there is all the chemicals that were either advertently or inadvertently added to the plastic, as well as those that were absorbed from the environment, get also ingested by the animals that confuse plastic with food. And there is accumulation and bioaccumulation, and there are different kinds of damage as well. So just briefly on that, yeah. So next question.
Sorry, before we move on to Scott's question, another question that's slightly broader, but it's how do we get action at scale, and do we need international agreement through the COP? Can we get big business such as cruise companies, major fishery companies to contribute? So any comments on that?
Pauline, I think you're well placed.
Yes, sure. There's been talks for a few years of a UN plastics treaty. It hasn't happened yet. That would be great. There's many people working on it. And I think that would be one step towards collaboration, which is very much needed. I mean, the UN treaties are still voluntary. So local and national actions will still be huge drivers. And I think companies, you're right, have a huge role to play. And hopefully more companies are starting to sign up to being carbon neutral, all those sorts of things, which help them assess the role of plastics in their supply chain and whether they are truly needed.
Thank you. Alexis, would you like to comment?
Yes, thanks. Again, short answer, yes. We need international collaboration. We can say the oceans, but it's just the one ocean. It's connected throughout. And we just discussed the fact that doing something on one side, can have a negative effect on the other side of the planet. But I want to put a positive note here. It's happened before, and it worked. In the late less than a century ago, we've banned internationally. Whaling was a terrible thing, and all species of whale were on the brink of extinction. And by international treaties and agreement, banning the whaling, now they're back almost, for some of them, to their original numbers, what we think were their original numbers. So it is possible, and I just want to put this positive note there.
Thank you. Thank you. I think both of you have covered most of it, so I don't have anything to add, unless you do, Zhixuan.
Sorry, I was lost connection just now. Would you mind to repeat the question?
It was a question about international treaties, but I think both Pauline and Alexis have done a very wide coverage of it. I was just wondering whether you had another comment, but I think they provided a very comprehensive coverage. So probably it might be better to go to the next question. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and we're running, I think we've got time for just one more. We're at 13:37, so maybe the best person replies to this. But there have been some recent news articles about developing bacteria that can consume plastic. Do these just feed off one particular type of plastic? And could this be a viable route to help clean up the oceans?
Alexis?
There's no one solution that can work. Short answer again. So a combination of solutions. I'm not an expert about that particular bacteria. I've heard about it. It's probably true, but if we were to put enough bacteria to swallow up all of the plastic that is in the ocean today, I think it will be another disaster in itself. So a combination of solutions, and whether that one is efficient or not, I can't tell. I'm not an expert.
Probably just one line to add is, we don't need one solution. We need a whole raft of different interventions. And just these solutions about bacteria and enzymes is probably a niche application that can have a role, but of course there are many things to think about with those because there are different kinds of pollution, and it's in every part of the ocean. So
I think we might be running quite short of time. So do you want to ask any one last killer question yourself, Arturo, of the panelists?
Just to see if you have a message for young people, because that was one of the questions that we left a little bit less explored. So in terms of people who are in the audience now with small children or young students, what would be the message that you would give them in terms of whether you want to go into entrepreneurship, or whether you want to go and study a PhD, or whether you want to go into philanthropy? What would be the message that you would give them? Should we start with you, Pauline?
Happy to. I think it's fairly obvious that children are probably the biggest source of behavior change in the home. When they come home, when they have a project and talk to their parents about plastics, it kind of spurs a lot of conversations that wouldn't have happened if you just tell people like, oh, you have to stop using plastic bottles. So I think that is a huge lever of change, and we need to nurture this creativity and this care for nature. So I just want to see more of that, and allow people to explore their interest, and also tell governments that we care about environment, marine environment, terrestrial environment, and want to protect that so that future generations still can enjoy it and see amazing mammals not choking on plastics or nets. So I think we need to harness that energy and make sure that policymakers respond to what the younger generations are telling us.
Alexis?
I was about to say something in the same lines of what Pauline just said. I wanted to say bluntly, listen to them. I think the natural naiveness, a positive side of the naiveness, if that's a word in English, of the younger generation tends to be more in protection of what's natural and fantastic to their eyes, and try to nurture. I was about to use this expression, fuel in their project, but it's a terrible one in this instance. But nurture is the right word. Pauline, you're right. Their projects and open their eyes. We've been oblivious to what was happening on the ocean because we couldn't see it. So if with the likes of Ocean X and perhaps even Sir David Attenborough and the BBC Planet Earth, or all those things that are wonderful. And very informative, show them the wonders of what they cannot see, and they'll try to protect it, I'm sure.
Zhixuan, what would be your last message for young people?
I think it's very simple thing you can do. For the children, you can have a look of the ingredients of the shampoo, and because when I started to do my program, I didn't realize how much microplastic ingredients actually added into your shampoo. I think very simple thing, you can pick randomly one shampoo and read about their ingredients, and you will find at least 2 or 3 kind of microplastics, but they have different fancy names on the ingredients, and you will learn, this kind of ingredients, they are a kind of microplastics, but it is a kind of one category thing, and it has a different name. But then you find there is another kind of thing, and also microplastics, but have a different name. So you can actually, there's a lot of knowledge, and you can easily find on the kind of thing around you in your life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think now is the time for me just to provide a final comment. I think something that was very satisfying of this event is that we covered all the topics that usually come up, whether it is a small meeting in one of the departments as well as an international conference. They keep coming up, the international agreements, looking at the whole value chain, trying to improve information, education, and engagement, and also take the risks. And also, as Alexis was saying, put in place all those mechanisms that allow you to ensure that you're not going to be creating unintended consequences too soon, that in ways that could have been avoided. And so it's been a very pleasant and insightful event. I really enjoyed it. I wish we had 3 times the time. But I hope that we will all stay in touch. And of course, I need to thank every one of you for all your insights and for your great answers. And with that, now I can only thank Nicola and her team for the great organization of the event. And then I can only say thanks again, and hand it over back to you.
Thank you, Arturo, and thank you all the panelists for a great discussion. And there were a lot of more questions that we'd like to have got to, so we'll definitely take a look at them and see if there's anything else that other resources that we can share post follow-up. So we will be sending you an email with a recording after the event. I think what's also been amazing about this is that there have been questions being asked, and then on the chat, lots of comments going on in the chat as well as with the panelists. So it's obviously a fascinating discussion and something that people are very engaged with. And meanwhile, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us, and see you soon, and see you next time. Thank you very much.